Donald Trump's lawyers are rushing to make a deal with the DOJ to drop Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS in exchange for a $1.7 billion fund to compensate his allies who claim they were wrongfully targeted by the Biden administration. That is according to ABC News and New York Times sources familiar with the deliberations. Democrats say it would be a political slush fund.
To the extent that he wants to give $1 million to each of 1,600 pardoned rioters and insurrectionists, we think that that's an unconstitutional use of money. Only Congress has the power to appropriate money. And Congress never voted on creating this $1.7 billion political slush fund at the Department of Justice, and Congress would never pass that. There's no way he could get that through Congress. So this is just an invention on his part.
Joining me now, Brendan Ballou, former federal prosecutor, former DOJ national security lawyer, and the author of the new book, When Companies Run the Courts. Welcome, my friend. It's good to have you on this because Wednesday's the deadline for Trump's lawyers and the DOJ to explain to a U.S. District Court judge whether the two parties are, quote, sufficiently adverse to each other, so then she can then decide if this case can even be heard by a federal court. Does it seem that the parties are trying to settle before the lawsuit faces any further scrutiny?
Absolutely. And it seems like the Department of Justice and Trump are rushing to try to get a settlement together. That said, the judge could still dismiss the case and refuse to approve the settlement. All court cases in federal court require an actual what's called case or controversy. The parties actually need to be adverse to each other. If they're not, then the courts can be a platform for creating sham settlements, which this seems to be exactly what that is. Now, fortunately, the judge in the Southern District of Florida, I think, has expressed enormous skepticism about whether the parties are actually adverse here. And they've got several really qualified amici or friends of the court that are making powerful arguments on this. In fact, they've rushed to file those early. The challenge that we've got is that even if this judge dismisses this suit, the president has a number of administrative complaints against the Department of Justice demanding hundreds of millions of dollars. It's at least possible that the president could come up with a settlement through those administrative proceedings, never having to get court approval and potentially never even having to announce such a settlement to the public at large.
Wow. But back to this $1.7 billion compensation fund for Trump allies. How brazen would that be? Is there any precedent for a settlement like this?
None. I don't want to overstate, I try not to overstate things, but this is completely unprecedented. It's so unprecedented almost that the laws don't even really contemplate a violation of this magnitude, at least ordinarily. I think that there are a number of legal problems here, and Representative Raskin pointed to some of them. First is that initial problem about whether there's a case or controversy. But even if the settlement gets approved, if the president is in charge of that settlement fund, it's essentially the creation of a new department or agency without any congressional approval. I also think that the deeper problem here, and again, Representative Raskin pointed to this, I was involved in January 6 prosecutions for several years. If 1,600 rioters are given money, potentially $1 million each with $100 million left to spare, that is essentially the creation or empowerment of a militia or paramilitary force that's loyal to the president, but fundamentally unaccountable to the law. That is well outside the statutory authority of the president, and so should be challenged under the Administrative Procedure Act.
Sobering thought there. So a former IRS contractor serving 5 years in prison for leaking the tax return documents about Trump and thousands of other Americans, in fact, during Trump's first term. As we go back, the Justice Department defended itself against other lawsuits regarding this leak, but why not this one? Because $10 billion, that was a pretty large ask.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just shows the double standard that's going on in this case. We have a fundamental problem, which is even if you had a sort of historical separation between the Department of Justice and the White House, ultimately, the president is the boss of the lawyers that are arguing these cases. So, it seems fundamentally incompatible for the Department of Justice to settle a lawsuit with the sitting president of the United States. It raises all the legal problems that we've been talking about, but also raises potentially a host of professional problems for the individual lawyers that are involved in the case. So if you see lawyers that are on these briefs arguing for a settlement like this, I would hope that there are potential bar challenges challenging this sort of dual loyalty between two clients here.
Okay, Senator Chris Van Hollen wrote on X, while people drown in high prices and inflation, Trump's lining his and his buddies' pockets. We will fight this. So what could a fight look like? Could members of Congress stop it? Could taxpayers sue over the settlement?
Great question. It's something that our law firm is talking to a lot of people about right now. Ordinarily, it's tough to have what's called taxpayer standing in a suit when the government is generally doing something illegal. That said, think about the specific kinds of people who are going to be harmed here. If January 6 rioters, if Proud Boys and Oath Keepers are going to be getting money from the government outside of the government's actual statutory or legal authority to do so, this creates enormous risk for instance, the officers that were defending the Capitol on January 6 who continue to receive death threats regularly. If we're going to give the people that are threatening them hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions of dollars, that creates an enormous risk for them and potentially creates standing that you can sue in court.
Okay, Brendan Ballou, thank you so much. Again, author of When Companies Run the Courts. I'll look forward to talking with you more about that as well. Thanks, my friend.